Reverend, get the message.
Great. All right. Good evening. It is January 5th, 2010. It is 5:46 p.m. This is a regular board meeting of the Brownsville Navigation District. I hereby call this meeting to order. Vicky, would you lead us in a prayer?
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us here today. We ask you to please bless our court director, board, and staff. Please guide them and help them make the best decisions for the benefit of our court and our community. We thank you for the year 2009 and ask you for guidance and support for 2010. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Didn't forget it. I tell you what, we got it.
Okay, item number 2 is public audience. We have no one signed up to speak. Item number 3, receive port director's report. Item A, short sea shipping.
I'll be very brief with my report. Just kind of wanted to touch on a couple of things, developments that have occurred in short sea shipping that would potentially affect our port. Well, one is that if you recall, we we signed an agreement with MARAD, and we were waiting for that legislation, the developing the Port Infrastructure Development Fund to go into effect. A law was passed on the 28th of October. It's under the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2010. So that provision for the Port Infrastructure Development Fund is included. We helped out in getting that thing done, but it also verifies our engagement with the agreement with MARAD going forward. So that's a good thing. The other thing, too, that happened also last month was was also some additional funding action that was taken by Congress, and that was the transportation spending. They signed an omnibus House appropriations bill that rolled in a bunch of programs into one, and part of that was the transportation bill. And included in there was very specific discretionary funding for MARAD to do the short sea shipping. There's $7 million that were set aside for that. And we were also instrumental in helping push for that and getting that done. And of course, what bodes well for with us there is the Sea Bridge freight, and how they might benefit from that. And lastly, with that segue, I'll talk about Sea Bridge. I mean, a year ago, we were talking about initiating a container service, and so I kind of thought it would be neat to just kind of say, well, how did we do? At least rough numbers and so forth. Well, Sea Bridge has been in operation for 1 year, and in that 1 year, as it relates to containers, we moved a total of 3,326 containers. We translates into 6,652 TEUs. Ton equivalent units, and that's how they're measured. These are all 40-foot plus containers. It may not seem like a whole lot, but when you started with 0 and then all of a sudden you're on a regular basis and we had over 6,600 TEUs, we think that's good, especially when you read that, everywhere else around the country there, everybody's going the other way, and we actually were able to initiate and start a service, not without some struggles, obviously, but they're still here a year later. And this number doesn't include the poles that were moved, the juice concentrate tanks that were also loaded, other commodities such as the portable buildings that were brought here for shipment into Mexico, heavy equipment. There was construction equipment that was also utilized. So this is just strictly focusing on containers, but it kind of put us on the map, and I think that's very good for the Port of Brownsville. So we hope that 2010 will only increase those numbers, and good things will happen going forward. But you've heard me say before in the great wisdom of the great philosopher Richard Pryor, you got to learn to crawl before you can run. So, we crawled last year, and you know what, we're still crawling, but we got some numbers and we kept some business going. So that's very good. That really concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Campirano.
Report.
Item number 4, consider an action on the following consent agenda items. Item A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of December 16, 2009. Item B, approval to authorize payments over $25,000. Item 1, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas monthly payment of employee health insurance in the amount of $57,000. Item 2, city capital monthly lease rental payment for the crane, mobile harbor crane, in the amount of $28,564.75. Item number 3, HDR cargo dock 16, in the amount of $241,657.94. Item 4, HDR oil dock number 6, in the amount of $163,996.95. Item 5, HDR DMPA 8 rehab, in the amount of $12,500. Item C, approval of the following leases. Item 1, 905 BMW Inc., a new lease, and Premier Refactories Inc., a release.
Any discussion on any of these?
On the Blue Cross and Blue Shield, y'all are wanting that to be approved for the whole year.
Yeah, and also the city
Yeah,
capital, also that's a monthly payment.
the lease payment on the mobile harbor crane, so.
Okay, do we have a motion? We got a motion by Commissioner Cowan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Items carried.
Item number 5, presentation of the completed master plan, Phase 1 and 2 by Rich Tubner of O'Brien's Response Management, Inc.
Well, let me kind of just a couple of comments while Rich gets ready to do a brief presentation. We kind of had that sent over to you all sometime last month, and there's a lot of material in here. This is a whole complete package, including Phase 1 as well as Phase 2. What we'll get out of this is what we make of it. I think that we're at a point in time now where there's some things in here that we can reflect back on, say we've done, and then there's also some things that also point out a lot of work that we've got to do. And so this was a good opportunity to just kind of put it on the agenda for discussion. No action is required, but at some point in time, we're going to get back on spending some time on our strategic planning and doing a lot more in-house than what we've done in the past. So really with that, I just want to go ahead and give Rich a presentation to present.
Are we going to have a...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, no, we'll just...
It's right there.
Can you get by him? Who's on first?
You want to just move right here? Showed up just in time, or else we wouldn't have been able to see them.
Does he need to move that chair or not? Let me move it.
There.
Can you see? Yeah, I got it. No problem. Thank you.
Ready? That's a nature shot.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Is it a little deal on the computer?
Yeah, it was working.
Maybe it has to be on the other side of the room.
Just
Hit the arrow.
Do it manually.
These guys coming to the janitor. We transferred it to somebody else.
Yes.
Transfer it easy with you.
I'm just going to do a kind of a refresher of the master plan process. It's taken quite a while, and the board has significantly changed since it was begun. Phase 1 has been, it was a 3-phase project. The first 2 phases were funded, and the 3rd phase was, the scope was recommended, but we were waiting to get to this point in the project, and then the port was going to go forward with the concepts as the board and port director saw fit. First phase was, and this is just a summary, is basically it's where we are now. So it was an assessment of the infrastructure and a look at an approximation of where the operational efficiencies are. Took a look at lease structures, environmental systems, environmental conditions in the port, and then also all your regulatory controls. One of the big ones was, of course, the security improvement program. The whole security package, the regulatory compliance program was restructured, and thank you, was restructured, and the direct gain in that was that as soon as we got finished with that portion of our phase one, we started bringing in the grant, that port security grant awards, which are up to 11 million now. The team, and this has changed a little bit also. Originally, it was Black & Veatch was the program manager, project manager. Gonzalez Engineering is the local firm. They did a lot of the hands-on work. They helped us with traffic studies and that kind of thing. Martin & Associates did the economic analysis, and Halpro did the actual master plan process. They were the project managers and team lead for the actual master planning process. And in addition, we'll get into this on the next page. In addition, O'Brien's, and back in my capacity was with Black & Veatch, we oversaw and completed the environmental management study, the security programs, some of the port economic analysis, lease study, that kind of thing. We came up with the lease report, and then the recommendations on the new leasing structures. And then the rest of them we talked about just a second ago. Martin Association, you'll see their work that they've completed over in phase two. Black & Veatch only participated in phase one. They did a real lion's share of the engineering assessment work. They completed an analysis of the water and wastewater systems in the port, including all the lift stations and the actual three plants that are on the port, and made recommendations. So when you see this package when you review the package that you have, or when you have looked at it, there's a lot of material there. There is an environmental piece to it. There's a separate annex for the environmental assessment. There's a separate annex for the sewer and wastewater, and water assessment, those utility assessments. The electrical utility hasn't been completed yet. That's part of phase 3. But you'll see that those packages are in there, and there's a lot of material that's been compiled by the engineering assessment team. I think there's been a variety of recommendations that Mr. Camperano has taken consideration on, and we'll go forward with some. A lot of it's gone forward with already, but there's more to come in the next parts of the growth of the master plan process. Again, asset condition assessment. All the wharf structures were given a review to determine what condition they were in. A review of the reference material from the last master plan, the last condition assessment from the mid-90s was reviewed, and a lot of the same material that was in that assessment was also realized in this assessment. So some of the conditions and the infrastructure, capital infrastructure improvements that were recommended hadn't been accomplished, and some of them have been accomplished since this phase 1 has been completed. Did a complete assessment of the capacity of the port. So looking at the dock capacity and the infrastructure capacity, what it could handle, traffic study, that kind of thing. And then an interview of the tenants to determine where some of your major tenants were going with their growth. What were they expecting? And we got to remember that this is all in the 2007. 2008 timeframe, and it was a different economic condition than there is now. There's a few things that will be very readily apparent when you're reading this or when you're reviewing this, is that the price of oil was a lot higher. So there was a lot of activity in the Gulf and the deep water and the Western Gulf. In addition to that, there was the economic conditions were just better. I mean, the price of steel scrap steel was higher. So there's a lot of the material that goes into this is dated to that period in our economy. And then completed the security assessment and the review of the environmental programs. And we'll see towards the end of this that there's some elements that are included in the recommendations that focus on some other grant applications through EPA to help with what they call Brownsville, where you take some property that has issues or environmental issues, contamination, that kind of thing, and you're able to convert it to a usable piece of property. And then, of course, the analysis of the port lease structure. I think that's been very apparent. That the new lease structure has been put in place, and the tenants are slowly, the new tenants, right? The new tenants have been using the new lease structure to again gain a little bit on the capital, the relative capital of the port. I think the report, the initial lease report that we had, there hadn't been a escalation in lease for 22 years. So that's, it was 22 years worth of cost of living and differentials that were not realized by the port. Phase 1 has been completed, and then the actual report was approved about a little bit over a year ago. And then the updated lease structure, we talked through that a couple times already. That's been implemented. Phase 2 had two elements to this portion of the master planning process, and that was an outline land use plan, and that was completed by ALPRO, and then the economic analysis of the cargo potential for the port. It really had, and we're going to get into what the focus of that was. That was completed by John Martin and Associates. Land use and zoning plan. When you look at it, there's a lot of material in there, and I'm just trying to kind of introduce the topics, not go into everything in detail. The land use is it's an outline plan. What it does is basically give you a way forward. It doesn't give you the zoning structure. It doesn't give you land use structure. What it does is it gives you recommendations on how to go about growth within the port. So this section of the foundation document identified trade forecasts. So it took the analysis that was done on the economic side and some additional information. It made some forecasts on where it was going. Now I think the crystal ball changed a little bit, that they were looking in for the trade forecast and the economic analysis. So you'll see that there are there's some ground truthing that might need to be looked at and updated. And then the current port uses, summary of port operations and present capacity. So what you'll see is that the initial analysis that was done in phase 1, what you did in phase 2 is you took that analysis and you provided some recommendations on the way forward. What investments do you need to make? Where are the recommendations are going as far as port operations, additional port operations, and port development. The outline land use identifies these sectors. So it focused on all the, and there's going to be a laugher here in a second, but there's focused on all these items. And these are your traditional legacy programs. Of course, your bulk, which includes steel and break bulk, and petrochemical, which is integral to your livelihood. And then shipwreck and offshore support. Offshore support is tailed off. It was when this package was put together, offshore support was viewed as a real growth area, but it's been, and it still is going to be a growth area. It's just a matter of it's kind of in abeyance right now, waiting for the price of oil to get back into an area where it's cost effective. And then industrial and commercial land uses, that's just your strictly non-maritime use of the properties. Barge and fishing industry, containers, and then the last part of this was guidelines. What do you want? What is the group at Halcro recommending happen? And the biggest thing is coming up with a concept on how do you get from where you are now, which was phase 1, where you could possibly go, which is phase 2. And then what the recommendations are is producing some guidelines, identifying land use procedures and processes, so that you're not dealing with issues like buffers, where you have property and tenants whose businesses overlap on others and create a deleterious effect. And it goes internal to the port and it goes external. General layout of the port. It's kind of hard to do that with the industrial area, but as you expand out into the non-industrial area, the non-improved areas, how are you going to grow and where do you need to grow? And ensure integration of your encroachment requirements. So you want to prevent encroachment. You want to prevent businesses from being deleterious to their neighbors, and deleterious to your neighbors outside of the port also. Connectivity. Everybody has transportation requirements. Making sure that the transportation requirements are easily accessible for those pieces of property and the tenants that are going to use those, and the industries that are going to use those pieces of property. Create a center point development concept. Now it's going to be hard to do this in the existing industrial area, but as the expansion goes out beyond the industrial area, you'll be able to use this concept, and that's where you have a interdependent operation where your transportation, and all your utilities are set up around the development of a certain region of the port. And again, we're getting back into this buffer zone concept because this is a real problem, especially when you start bringing in hopefully bringing in some heavy industry, and then you have to bring in some more power for the heavy industry. You're going to end up bringing in, dealing with the encroachment problems of noise, of environmental aspects, especially when this whole concept of the green port, which is where, if you reviewed the environmental management system recommendations, that's where it really needs to go to be competitive over the next 15 years.
Mr. Tubner, could I just ask you a question on the recommendations and guidelines that you're proposing on that to create the center point development concept? Are you also recommending a location where it would be best suited for, or
You'll see
just that you're recommending that?
Just recommending that that's a part of the process, this growth process. It has to be there has to be a plan to go forward, and the plan, the recommendations identify about 10 items that should be included in that growth plan. So when this is basically a zoning and land use concept, and then the next piece of it is identifying where you're going to use, where those tenants are going to be. You want to make sure that you don't put an industrial tenant that doesn't need a nexus to the waterfront on a waterfront piece of property. Just items like that. And it's just ensuring that it's very apparent. It's something that everybody you can put it on the website. Everybody that needs to know it can go through there and pull out the bullets on how they're going to grow. So if you have a Hutchinson, or you have somebody like a major tenant that comes in and wants to invest in the port, put in infrastructure, they know what the guidelines they have to operate from. There's even recommendations in here, which it's kind of following the existing programs, but where you have certain industries on one side of the port and other industries on the other side of the port. And that's kind of the status quo here. And it's a good system, but it just puts a little bit more emphasis on that.
The other thing I want to make a comment on is that most of this is taking the existing footprint of the port, which essentially see the turning base, and it doesn't go out and look at, the area that we're talking about by Port Isabel, or the area that 550, or other potential areas. So it's really kind of looking at footprint. Doesn't mean that some of these concepts and principles couldn't be applied in the future to areas where now we really have an opportunity to talk about starting with a clean slate and saying, how do we want this area to develop? It's hard kind of taking what you've already got and trying to, how do we redevelop it to address some of the issues that we didn't address in the past? So, but this footprint is really looking at the turning base, and if you want to kind of, don't expect to see a land use plan with recommendations and zoning issues on all our property over there by 511 and 550, or looking out there. It kind of, because remember, if you look at this, it talked about, this is what you got, and then it looked at the economic forecast and say, you take your core industry and what do you need to sustain it over the next 15 years? And so it kind of looks at that footprint.
Okay.
There's still a lot of work to do on some of those other areas.
And something to keep in mind, and Eddie and the team that we've had in place, and the initial group that we had during phase one, it's really a neat dynamic that you have, because if you look at a master plan, if you go on Port of Jacksonville's website, you pull their master plan up, what they're focusing on is enhancing their supply chain. They're not focusing on growth. They're focusing on maybe growth within that supply chain, but they have tenants. They don't have a large reach of land that they can develop, and that's, I think Eddie and I were talking about that earlier. Is you have a development issue, not issue, but a development project. Everybody else has a redevelopment project. They either have to sustain their supply chains, improve their infrastructure that they already have for the customers and the tenants they already have. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to maximize the property they have. You, on the other hand, you have how many thousands of acres that are untouched? The dynamic is much different. It's greenfield dynamics. I guess the concept is the sky's the limit. You don't have to follow a pattern. And I think that maybe that with Hal Crow and some of these other guys that have been really focused on these kind of ports, and even John Martin, where there's the dynamic is this is what we have to work with, and this is all the farther we can go. Now you've expanded. They have to expand their concept. They have to be a little bit more ethereal to go out and see the things that could be, not just the things that are in front of them.
In fact, even some of the things that happened in late 2008 and 2009 are not even captured in this plan because there were things we weren't even talking about back then. And so, it's kind of like saying, the Port of Brownsville, they talk about how much potential we have, and we're still trying to figure out how to be a port, where a lot of these other places they've been a port for a long time. How do they redevelop? Right. How are they doing other things that they've been forced to because they're really in a redevelopment process as opposed to development process?
Now I'm going to go into that MA stands for market assessment. I'm going to go into the market assessment. This is the reference material. The way it was done, phase 2, it's kind of backwards, and it's the way it was presented in the report. That's why it's on the presentation like this. Is the economic and the market analysis was completed first. The material that was in that market analysis was used then to build your outline land use plan. It looked at, again, the core business of the port. And he broke it down by competition and forecast to give you an idea of the existing programs that you have or existing supply chains, the core business of the port. What can you look in the next 15 years, the next 5 years? What can you look at expanding, contracting? And again, that's the dynamic that you were working with based on the economic conditions that were apparent at the time. You can see right now in this forecast and in the report, the economic analysis, that there was supposed to be a downturn in steel. That wasn't. It's just the opposite in the port here. So there's some things that you just, with the economic analysis, it's a very your statistics are based on the conditions at the time. It's hard to analyze where we're going to be in the next 2 years on any certain supply chain. They can use historic numbers, but that works sometimes and doesn't work. It's just giving you some groundwork to work from and give you some general ideas of who's using it, who your competition is, and if you identify who your competition, then you know possibly where there's some blue ocean for you to go to, where there might not be a competition in that market. And identify potential opportunities. And that was the last piece of the forecast was opportunities. So opportunities in containers, steel products again. And then other opportunities, and this was, we were talking about earlier, was cocoa beans. I don't know, maybe that's next year's.
What was the cocoa beans?
That's it. We have to bring John Martin in to answer that question.
It's just
opportunities.
A potential opportunity to actually get into using the Port of Brownsville for importation of cocoa beans.
Because they have roasting facilities like in Houston, because they have that designation. And so I think he was saying
The link between Houston and
import it
the port.
through us because it was closer, and then maybe truck it or get it to Houston somewhere. I think
Barge it over.
It's the same. If you look at what was being really focused. A focused effort for developers in this area is that, we looked at ethanol, and ethanol with the price of fuel kind of went bust. It takes a lot of power to produce, and it takes a lot of input to produce the ethanol product. So with that, when the price of oil was basically half what it was in 2007, 2008, that's, again, not a sustainable market. Biofuels. When the price of oil, again, is low, biofuels is a hard concept to sell just because it's an environmentally friendly product, just like ethanol is. But it's not, it's not a cost-effective product right now. Phase 3, there's 2 slides here. And this is when we were doing our initial scope. These are the concepts that we had as the concepts for Phase 3. There was again, we talked about a general scope for Phase 3, but it wasn't something that was part of anybody's contract. Analysis of existing power distribution. With growth, especially when it comes to heavy industry, you're going to have a demand for power. You got to look at what the current, just like with your sewers, your treatment stations, your pump stations, all that kind of stuff. If you don't have the infrastructure, you might have a desire. Some might have the desire to come here, but if they don't, their infrastructure's not there, then they're not going to be able to accomplish their goal. The port development options analysis and consultation. When you decide on a certain area, you either team with somebody like a Hutchinson or somebody like a Gatex or somebody that's going to come in here with a new concept or a different concept where they shoulder the function of analysis of the infrastructure improvements, or actually provide the infrastructure improvements. Those are the things that you're going to have to look at when you look at these recommendations have been made. Where do we want to go? What is the goal and the vision, the new goal and the vision? There's something that's in this development area of the port and down the channel where it might be a residential or resort type of development where you have to look at where the funding's going to come from. You're going to initially going to fund a consultant to look at to provide you with a assessment, a feasibility assessment, where you're going to look at a possible client that might do that for you. So those are the concepts that you're going to have to deal with. And I think Eddie's been thinking about these things, and you've been talking about them in generalities already, even in your capital improvement programs and everything else. Follow-on economic analysis. The economic analysis, as we just discussed, the indicators have changed substantially since 2008. Then develop your concepts. If you have some selected growth programs, where do you want to grow? Use your guidance that you've developed, use the recommendations, and do a sustained growth project. Then financial support. Try to have somebody else pay for it.
Let me use an example of selected growth programs, because I know it's kind of, 2 years ago it was real controversial, but the port has developed the niche as being a port where you have dismantling operations go. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you're going to sustain those programs or that growth, that you're going to be known that anybody who wants to can come down here and just, hey, I bought a 2 or 3 of us got together, we thought it was a good idea, we bought a ship, but let's go down there and break it. And so even though there was a lot of concern about whether the area could sustain it, what we finally wound up doing was going through a process to determine that, okay, we can sustain this program, it can work, but it's who and how you let them do it. If you're going to, we settled on selecting a group who was very knowledgeable in the business. It wasn't somebody that just started up. They've been in the business. They know how to operate. They've got all the certifications. And so if we were to continue that in the future, we have a way of approaching and looking at it from here is a particular niche, and will it grow, and if so, how do we want it to grow, as opposed to just opening the doors and letting anybody come in here and do it.
It's part of the guidelines. That's good.
Well, I think it allows you to sit down and kind of vet a process and decide. I mean, because ultimately, in the end, we're the landlord. And I think as the landlord, you have the right to make certain determinations as to whether or not you think this is good for, as a landlord, whether it's good for you or not. In our case, it's beyond just ourselves, it's the community. But opening it up and oversaturating the industry may not be good for anybody. Especially if it's done in a way that is going to be very harmful.
Right.
And the environmental management system. And that EPA Brownsville grant program is something that we had discussed, and that could have been used. Here's an example of what that will do, and this is already a project. I think it's part of your Tiger grant, though, isn't it? The rail.
Oh, the rail, yeah.
The rail yard over there's got a couple of old sulfur tank cars that need to be removed before the yard can be improved. That would have been this is public land, and an old tenant left that contaminant on that property. You have to do something with it before it can be improved. That would have been a grant project. That's just an example of what we're talking about. Maybe it's the, it's the ballast pits or something like that. You got to make a decision on where you want to go, what areas you want to look at. But there is grant support programs out there that can be used to recover land that has been contaminated. Security improvement program, we update that every year. And that was a result of the grant, of this master plan development. Our next package will be going out by the 12th of February for 2010 Port Security Grant
And that's
program.
probably the one example that you can point to as, the most successful element of this whole process has been the sustainability and the growth in the security improvement program. I mean, we're still using it as a footprint going forward.
Been real well there.
And again, today we just had a meeting with the guys from TSA, and still to today, we got our grants over a year after the ports in New York and LA, and they still don't have any of their system up and running. We're the only port in the country that has fixed readers that are operational now. And that was in congressional testimony. It was given to the Congress. So.
Little port that could.
Privatization versus public operation. Is there some pieces of that you want to give long-term leases and let somebody operate a terminal, a lease terminal? I guess that's something that you have to look at when that situation arises. You can provide some guidance on that. I think right now that's not the way that the operation is. It's not the methodology that's being used in the port, but that's the kind of methodology that somebody that's going to invest $100 million in a terminal would probably want to see. Is the ability to say, this is my piece of dirt for 25 years. Reach out to city and county folks and engage the community. There's a lot of, and I think some of this is already happening with Imagine Brownsville. So it's just that grow together. Don't do deleterious acts. Don't be competing for resources that are very limited. And then blue ocean concept. Blue ocean concept is where you develop your own market. You can always compete with somebody else to take a little piece of what they have, but the easiest way to be competitive is to not have a competitor. Transportation hub programs. The bridge, where you are, or a truck on rails. That's a good example of a hub program. Right now there's a congestion at the border crossing, the Laredo border crossing, 4 trucks on rails. They have a hard time with that piece of the nexus between the two modes of transportation. And maybe the focus could be on some of those overflow activities. And that's it. And that was just a summary. I think we're going to, we were planning on having some discussion points on, what's in here right now. And then it's been a while coming. There's been some changes and different dynamics, both economic and personnel and contractor, project team, the whole thing. So it's been a little while coming, and some of the materials dated, but it's got some really good recommendations that have got a good foundation.
Again, this is not an action item, it's just a kind of discussion item, but this is something, for us to consider going forward at some point in time. We did take formal action on phase 1 of the plan, and probably need to do the same thing on phase 2 to put it to bed, but we certainly wanted the opportunity to kind of just say, okay, here it is, it's your opportunity, we need to look at it, we need to use it, but, really I think on moving forward on the 3rd phase is that, a lot of what we'll be going back to is looking at what's in there as using as the basis or moving forward. And then there's a lot of components that we've been talking about, like I said, that are not even included in here. We're doing the master plan on the utility improvements on the east side with the Laguna Madre Water District. Well, that wasn't a concept that was in here when we started. Wind energy has taken on a lot more actually dynamic than, here's a potential you ought to look at it. We're actually even engaged in it now. And so there are some things. We moved a lot further along on some of the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure that we had when we started that. The 550 wasn't even a concept in here when we started talking about it. So there are some things that have changed the dynamic, and if there's one thing about any plan that is used in this nature, that it's always going to be fluid. It's never going to be constant. It's constantly changing it. You're going back and changing it. But there's also some obvious things in here that we haven't done. We've talked about the environmental issues. Yes, we've taken some of these program elements and incorporated into our leases, and now having some language into the protection going forward, but we don't have a strong environmental program. And we know that, So there are some things in here that are a good footprint for us to always remember going forward, and only time will tell whether we decide it was money well spent. Unless y'all have any questions, that concludes this item on the agenda.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move on to the next item.
Item number 6, consideration and action to authorize staff to reimburse the district operating funds in the Dock 16 construction fund for expenditures on Dock 16 capital project.
To date, we've spent $1.472 million on the Dock 16 engineering plans, and we're requesting authorization to take those monies out of Dock 16 fund and move that back into operations.
And we had talked about this, I'd mentioned to you during the budget process, and what this does, quite candidly, is it helps us build up our other capital funds for doing some of the other things that we've identified. And so, consequently, we have restricted Fund 16 through our own internal procedures. And so at this point, this is the amount at present, but, in the end, it's going to be closer to $2 million.
How much will we have in Dock 16 after this?
We've got $10.7 million now.
Yeah. So
we'd still be at 8.7. And we're still, but yeah, we put 50,000 a week in it. So we'd essentially, if we didn't do anything between now and then, by the end of the year, the fund would be built up again, because it's about $2.6 million a year.
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Arambula.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 7, consideration and action on assignments, negotiations, easements, subleases, and contracts in general. Item 1, Quality Weighing Service, Inc. Authority to negotiate.
Commissioners, Quality Weighing lease, the present lease is due to expire the 14th of this month, and they're asking for a new lease, so I'm asking for the authority to negotiate a new contract lease.
I'll make a motion. Do we do that?
All right, we got a motion by Commissioner Cowan. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Arambula. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item carries.
I'd like to make a comment about this, if I may. And this is right out here. And if you recall, during the budget process, we said, there's a lot going on, and we're going to start doing major street reconstruction. The entrance to the port and so forth is that we set some money aside to actually do nothing but like a traffic engineering study of this area. And while, this lease is coming to an end, we may purposely certainly work with the tenant and not to move them out of there, but slow this process down to really look at what kind of improvements we need to make there, and whether or not we may have to look at maybe moving it further away from that intersection. But we certainly want to assure the tenant that we want to keep them, we want to keep working with them, but this is something that you may not get back next month. It's ready to go. We may buy ourselves some time and kind of work with them on how we can address the configuration of that whole area. We've got multiple things going on. Again, we've got our, we've decided that we want to take our time in looking at the development of that area, especially with the command control center. We've got the street improvement projects that are starting. So we've got a few things that we do think will have a significant impact of the dynamics of that area. And we certainly want to work with them to see how we address it going forward. And so just kind of more of as a precautionary note on that than anything else.
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion by Commissioner Arambula. Have a second.
You're still talking about quality weighing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could already pass that one.
Oh, we already passed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Item number 2, Gulf Facilities, Inc. Authority to negotiate.
Gulf Facilities' present lease also is due to expire on the 28th of February of this year,
and they're asking for a new lease for warehousing and storage. And I should avoid giving authority to negotiate any lease with this company.
Is it just that one property you have
It's just
outlined?
this one. Yes, sir, just this one.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Reed, second by Commissioner Cowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 8, consideration and action on extending the engineering service contract on Placement Area 5B Rehabilitation Project with consultant HDR Engineering, Inc. to include construction phase engineering services.
Chairman Mazo, Board Commissioners, this is an extension of the engineering services agreement that we have with HDR. The prior agreement that you had authorized did not include construction phase services. What we're doing on these two projects, this item and next item, is we're utilizing, as we had earlier informed you, port personnel. In fact, we have a pre-construction conference set up tomorrow to kick everything off for these two projects. And all the documents have been signed, everything is in order. But we do need some technical support from the engineering consultant for this project. We're going to obviously attempt to minimize their involvement, but we feel that we do need them, and they've provided us an estimate in the amount of $12,900.30 for that work, and that's what we're asking for you to authorize this evening.
What kind of technical support are you talking about?
Well, basically what they would be doing is they would be, when there's consultations or issues, like milestones of the type of the work that is going on, basically, since they were the ones who designed it. What I want to do is have access to them to come and make sure that what is being built is in conformance to the plans.
Is that in part of their normal contract or designing it to make sure that it's...
Well, the way we set up the design contracts, this part of it was not included.
Okay.
How would the fee be calculated? Time and materials?
Yes, time and expenses, basically. Time and expenses is what it would be. And the estimate, I have a tabulation, I didn't reproduce this for you, but I have a tabulation that indicates the different phases and the different estimates for each of the progress points, and how that total estimate was determined.
It wasn't included because we forgot to put it in there?
No, we intentionally did not include it.
Intentionally did not include it, okay.
Yeah. And we intentionally thought of bringing it back to you at this time. This item is actually less than $25,000, but we felt, because of the way that it's being worked, that it was important for us to bring it to you.
Well, we're also talking about taking an existing contract into it, so
Yeah.
it does change the dynamics of just $25,000.
Yeah.
Make a motion on that, Mr. Chairman, on item number 8.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Arambula, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 9, consideration and action on extending the engineering services contract on Placement Area 8 Rehabilitation Project with consultant HDR Engineering, Inc. to include construction phase engineering.
Chairman Masso, for Commissioner, once again, this item is virtually identical to the other one, except that the other one was for Area 5B, this one is for Area 8. Area 8 is a little bit of a slightly larger challenge, so the estimated figure here is $14,613.50. And again, it's the same thing. For construction phase engineering services, we're not doing resident inspection by them. We're basically, the maintenance department and the engineering department are providing the inspectors, as on the prior one, for this project as well.
Okay, any further discussion?
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Commissioner Lopez. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Cowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 10, consideration and action on extending the contract on the wastewater treatment facilities rehab to existing clarifier project with consultants MRS Engineering to include construction phase engineering services.
Chairman Masso, Board Commissioners, once again, this one is similar to the other ones, except for the fact that this is for the clarifier. And there's a number of hours built in here that basically allow for the total to be what it is. Again, we're expecting not to reach that point, but we need to have that.
All right, we have a motion.
I just have one question. In the future, if we do this, wouldn't you be now asking for the technical portion of it to be included? I mean, because, again, I mean, it may have added up to the same amount, but it just seems strange to me you're coming back on every project asking for technical support.
See, the reason that I did it the way that, and I can do that, but the amount of involvement in the construction phase won't really be as detailed as once we finish the design. See, once we have a completed design, the consultant can have a better feel of what is required for the construction phase. Now, again, on this project, we're also going to do a lot of the inspection ourselves, so.
No, I understand that, and that's what you said when we approved these contracts. And you're coming back, I guess, I'm just trying to understand the process for in the future is, from the commissioner standpoint, should we know that you're probably going to come back for this and the cost is going to increase, or should it be included originally when we go out for bids? I'm just trying to get a handle on it.
Well, there's two things. One is that the nature of the project, not all of them may have that technical support. The second nature, the kind of working on 5 and 8 on the dredging, that is a little bit beyond what we do on a day-to-day thing. So that's one. But secondly is that at the time we're also looking at budgets that we really didn't know how the bids were going to come in, and it turns out that the bids came in a lot lower than we had anticipated. So we really didn't want to load them up because we didn't know how these things were going to come. And so, partly, at least on those two, we went back and said, look, we can't afford to do this, so let's come back. But not all of them will have, that technical support. If we can handle it in-house, then we're going to do that in-house.
Well, that was going to be my other question is, assuming we had very tight budgetary constraints and we couldn't afford this, I mean, could you feel confident that we had the staff to, or would you say, hey guys, we got to do this anyway?
I'll give you the perfect
that's what I'm trying to figure.
I think that
I'll give you the perfect example.
On him.
The fishing harbor project, we didn't use anyone.
Right.
We did everything ourselves. But that's because I felt confident. That's exactly what I was doing before. This is a little different.
Didn't you test material?
Yes, the only thing we did is we hired the testing lab, which was going to be something that was going to be done anyway. But the fishing harbor job, we didn't involve any consultant at any level for the inspection or construction phase other than the materials testing. But we handled everything. We handled the inspections. We made all the decisions. We made all the changes along the way. That was something that we could do, but that's right in my bailiwick.
But just for me in the future, if you think that...
Yeah, no, I understand.
Just to say, hey, then we may be coming back for this technical support. But anyway.
Like I said, I think it's safer for us to allow the design to be completed so that we can now have a clear, and I can have a clearer focus of where I can use our people too and minimize this impact.
Okay.
Is there any way we can negotiate on some of these contracts when we award the bid and negotiate this into the service into the awarding of the contract?
Well, what this is basically...
When they do the final contract?
Well, see, virtually all the engineers have tabulation of their hourly rates. What we've done here is we incorporated their hourly rates that they have on the prior agreement, and they have estimated the amount of time that they would be using on each of the phases, applying that same type of, so basically it's just like an extension. And
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not picking on anybody. I just want to know if there's any way on some of these contracts to, not on every single one, but on some of these contracts to be able, when it comes time, when you do the actual contract with the engineer that gets hired, say, okay, the scope of the work includes this. And he says yay or nay.
Well, for example, on the...
I mean, the private enterprise, I would do that. So I realize it's a different deal, but...
Well, see, on the dock design, for example, both Dock 16 and Dock 15, the contracts that we currently have with HDR do not include construction phase services. That's something that we're going to need to come back to you on hopefully once we know in the next couple of weeks that we got the grant. That's something that we will...
That we'll be real happy about.
So,
no, I was just more trying to understand the process and how,
I think you have a point, definitely, and it's easier for you to understand, and believe me, one of the things that we want to do is not only go into detail on these things, but on the entire process.
11, right?
From another perspective, I think it's great because the transparency issues there, and it gave us a breakdown even to the last dollar there.
Well, maybe, especially if it's tied to the cost of the construction project.
Yep.
We've seen that before, where it's a percentage of construction, and the estimate is up here.
Amazing how that
Here,
Amazing how that happens.
Watch
And
that.
then, on the disposal sites too, it was kind of handled in a way where, we were kind of moving the process a lot faster than normally would, because we know we got the Corps over here ready to issue a contract, so.
I'd like to
Yeah,
add
we're
that
under
our
some
board director
deadlines.
and our finance director had the foresight to add the numbers for these projects, for all of these 3 projects into the
In
budget.
anticipation.
So that's already provided for.
Yeah, these
Okay.
are part of the capital.
You entertain a motion to approve
Yes,
this?
I do.
I did.
Oh, you made a motion?
did?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
second the motion.
Yeah, I've got a motion, Commissioner Arambula, second by Commissioner Cowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 11, consideration and action on approval of additional task order under the Professional Services Agreement with Response Management Associates, Inc., RMA, to provide program management for project, that should be 2, under Round A Port Security Grant. We've already approved, as you well know, Project 1 under the Port Security Grant, Round A, and now we're ready to move forward with Project 2, and we're asking the board to consider this item. Project 2 is the port-wide risk management mitigation plan and business continuity, the resumption of trade plan. And what we'd like to do is for RMA to oversee, as they have on the other one, the contractors that are doing the work. The amount of the grant award is $149,179.45, and their contract amount will be $15,000 plus $8,000 travel expenses for a not-to-exceed contract of $23,000. Their current contract under Round 1, the Project 1, is $116,000, and that project was the facilities perimeter security, and that grant was almost $3 million, and the contract amount of that's $116,000.
All right, any discussion?
And the only question I have is on the reimbursements. Have those started coming in yet?
Sir, we submit them. John Sawicki is our project manager on that, and we do those like once. We were doing them just like once a quarter in the beginning because we didn't have that much to be reimbursed. But like last board meeting, we had that $425,000 item, and we submitted that the day after the board meeting, and within 5 days, we had the check from the government. So,
That's great.
Yeah, we stayed on top of
Good
that.
pay,
so.
people, we just,
How much are we out, is there still outstanding, would you say?
How big is
Is there still, how much is still outstanding, or is there any?
of money owed
Right,
back to
right.
us? Not, I mean,
The
John's
only
gonna do a
outstanding
report.
money would be what got spent this last quarter, and we can't ask for that to be reimbursed until I do the financial reports, and then we can ask for that.
Then we can ask for that back.
You have to report the money.
But it's not much, because we stay pretty tight on that, so we're not getting money.
Okay. It's not much?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to,
Much,
yeah.
Probably just what we paid RMA. I mean,
great.
I don't think we have any other outstanding.
One the check we just got was a
600 and something thousand,
This
so.
next one will probably be, let me say, 275.
I doubt that.
That's great.
Commissioner?
Sir, I just wanted to comment and add that last month, in the month of December, I took the opportunity to visit the port and went and saw the actual work that was being done by this company with the fiber optic and the cameras that they've been installed, and they took me on a tour of everything that's been done. Very impressive what they've done, and it's just great what they've been doing with these grant monies. They can actually, monitor every vehicle that's coming in here from the time it goes in to every area that's even around the warehouses. They can actually keep track of the cars, and I was able to see that. It's very impressive.
I'm sorry.
Well,
That project is probably going to be completed by the end of the month, and once it is, we're planning to ask you to all come and take the time to actually look at it, because that was a big one. That was a big project, and actually doing the work on this, on the business continuity resumption is part of a grant that we've already received, but what it'll also help us do is kind of help assess on what is needed going forward, so when round 10 comes about, we'll know what we need to apply for. And I do want to say about RMA, I mean, they've essentially been focusing strictly on the project management side. You know, they haven't, we made it clear from the very beginning that we were not going to, you know, have one contractor just come in and be the manager and the integrator and the supplier. And so they've, you know, a lot of what their budget has entailed, and they've done good work for us, has also been kind of restricted by the grant itself. So, I mean, it's not like, you know, they're not getting the $3 million project or the $2.5 million project. And this $23,000 that we're going to pay for this, I mean, that can affect going forward, could turn into, you know, millions of dollars on the round 10. So I do think they've been doing a very good job for the port. They've helped us stay on track. I mean, I made the comment when we were talking about the master plan, if there's one area of it that we've started from the beginning and kind of implemented going forward, it's probably been on the security. But grant-wise, we've probably exceeded $11 million in federal funding.
Very good.
And you heard, I think, Commissioner Cowan and Commissioner Arambola got to hear John Schwartz, who is the program director for the TWIG program at the Transportation Services Administration, and they know, and they're looking out and saying, you know, the port success in terms of being able to do what they've said they've done has got to translate into hopefully some consideration on future grant funding, and a lot of that has been because RMA has kept us focused and on track. So
Is round 10 the last round, or are there?
that's the next round.
That's the next round.
They haven't said, hey, this is it.
They can keep going.
Blow up their underwear on an airplane. It's probably going to continue in future rounds.
That's fine, bring it on.
That's right.
Even being able to see the vehicles out there with the cameras that they have, they can even get down and you can actually see the license plates of those vehicles. They can zoom in on that.
Well, that's just one camera.
That's one camera.
Yeah, that's just one camera.
And I mean, George is even, you know, I mean, we've always had a very good relationship with Border Patrol and Customs, but they even come now to use our equipment to help with their operations. So I mean, it's built up a very good working
relationship with them, which is good.
Which is very good.
Well, let's see when we can set up a tour once you're all done. Maybe on a Saturday morning would be good, a good time.
That would be a good thing.
After dinner,
In the morning after coffee.
First weekend in February.
there we go.
I'll make a motion on that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we got a motion by Commissioner Arambola. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 12, consideration and action on approval of an additional task order under the contract for consulting services with Metrica to conduct a port-wide risk management and trade resumption resiliency plan under the Port Security Grant Program Round 8, Project 2. This is, as you know, Metrica we hired to do our risk assessment, our regional risk or threat assessment, and they developed a training exercise with the Coast Guard, and they also implemented our community program awareness, you know, the NOW program, Not on Our Waterways. So what we'd like to do is do an extension under their current contract to move on to round 8 to do the risk management mitigation plan, business continuity and resumption plan. And also with them doing this, they're also going to come in right now. I mean, if we approve this, then they're going to start work immediately and do a gap analysis for us so that we'll have it in order to apply for our round 10, which is due February the 12th. So that's why we wanted to go ahead and get this approved. You just approved the contract for RMA to oversee this, but now we're asking you if you would approve this contract with them, which would be in the amount of $149,175, so that they can do this plan and get started. One, to benefit us in our round 10 funding, so we can take that to the Coast Guard and say, this is what we're applying for, this is why we need it, and we'll have this plan to back up why we need it. And this will also go forward into our future rounds. Not only will it help us with the round 10 funding, but every year when they do new grants, this plan will go forth with our future grant.
So Metrica will do the assessment, get the approval of Coast Guard. If we're awarded it, then John's company will.
Well, RMA will oversee them to make sure that Metrica does what they're supposed to do. I mean, that's what y'all just approved.
Right.
Yeah. And this, of course, we have a 25% cost match on this of the $149,000.
Not sure how you keep all these companies straight, but I'm glad.
Well, Metrica, they did our...
That is the main company that is doing
They did our
the security.
assessment, and they stayed on track. And, I mean, actually, we set up a system where they did, which again, we're kind of the only port in Texas, probably in the country, that set up that now. I mean, that was a national program, but they took it one step forward and went and talked to the Border Patrol, and they talked to the DPS, and so now we have a national reporting that it goes to a hotline that's manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to investigate any kind of activity on the waterway that is not supposed to be there. And so we actually took the national program one step further and involved all the DPS, and now they're actually looking at doing all the ports on that same program. So, you know, they took it one step forward. They went and developed relationships with them, and so they did a really good job.
That's excellent.
I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and pass this.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Cowan. Second by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 13, consider an action to authorize time extension to contract number 3688 for SecOps Inc. for Project B under Port Security Grant, Round 7. SecOps is the company that is doing all our integration, all the stuff that you went to look at, all the cameras, all the trenching for the fiber optics, all that aspect of that project. They have asked for a 30-day time extension for their contract, and mainly it's due to weather delays. I mean, all those camera installations, they can't open up a camera in the kind of weather that we've had because, you know, they're very sensitive
Humidity and so forth.
And so basically that's the main extension. What I'd like to ask for is instead of the 30-day extension, if we could go 45 days. And the reason for that is we're going to change locations of one of our cameras. We were originally going to put a camera up in Port Isabel to monitor that piece of the channel, and we were going to do it on property that was not owned by the port. We've now gone out and looked at the piece of property that we have on South Padre Island, and that will work just as well or maybe better. And so what we've got to do is get authority from the county to trench across a piece of their property. They have that on their agenda. They've already done the surveys. They've got it on their agenda, but their board meeting or their next commissioner meeting is not until the 21st. So we don't foresee any problems with that. So based on if it's approved at that time, then that will give them time to go out, put up the new tower, put up the cameras, do the fencing that they need to do around that, and we won't have to come back hopefully for another time.
Donna, can you refresh my memory? I know we had a lot of discussion about how much of the channels will be covered and the old cameras are going to go away and the new ones. On this contract, how much of the channel will be covered?
On this contract,
I'm sorry, maybe I'm going into too deep.
Yeah, I think you're really getting into the security plan.
Okay, well then.
okay, Rich is going to give y'all an update in the executive session.
Okay, apologies. I knew we had a lot of discussion about it. I was just curious. Okay.
That's all right.
You have to shoot me after
I'll
that.
be able to see plenty, John.
We got a motion by Commissioner Lopez.
As proposed by Ms. Imard.
The 45 days.
With the 45 days.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Arambula. All those in favor?
Can I ask a question before you vote? It's going to be in the minutes, and I assume they're okay that this would be without any additional compensation.
Right.
That's correct.
It's all
Without
falls
additional.
within the contract.
Okay. It's just a time extension.
Right.
Time extension only. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 14, consideration and action on authorizing the extension for agreements for professional services between the Brownsville Navigation Districts and Public-Private Strategies LLC for closeout of the railroad relocation project.
This is a project that we started on last year on getting this railroad relocation project closed out, and we hired public-private strategists to kind of help on that. And there has been a lot of movement towards getting it done. There has been a lot of exchange of information, review of information. There's been meetings with UP, ourselves, BRG, and trying to get all this thing finalized. And you know, every time we turn, we find another argument. I mean, there is, you know, kind of like agreements on top of agreements on top of agreements. Well, it's not completed, and we think we're very close to getting it complete. In fact, we're hoping that you know, we can do it obviously sooner than later. And there's some urgencies to getting this done. One on behalf of UP, who needs to close this project out. You know, this is the project that will result, when all is said and done, is that we will wind up with a Palo Alto yard as well as the old switch yard downtown Brownsville, and they will wind up with the Olvito yard. And so there's just a whole lot of instruments, a whole lot of exhibits, and a whole lot of things that needs to go into it. And so we didn't finish. We just didn't get the project done. And Public Strategies has requested an extension of the contract. I don't think that, and they've kind of said, let's keep it month to month. I don't think we want to do that. I think you want to create some sense of urgency to get this thing closed out and done. And so my recommendation is that we were going to do any kind of a time extension on this thing, that, you know, we did not leave it on a month to month. And I don't think it'd be really, we shouldn't go beyond 6 months and say, hey man, you know, we just got to get this thing finished. So
absolutely,
it's up to you how you want to proceed. I just do think that you need to put an ending date on this thing again and say, look, you know, we leave it open-ended. I don't want to be back here next year talking about another year has gone by.
How long has it been now?
It's been 1 year.
Well, exactly 1 year.
Yeah, we did this in January of last year.
I guess it's kind of like you're in the middle of it, and how do you, I mean, if you stopped it, would it ever get done, completed? I guess
we need to get it finished.
We need to get it finished, and
At $6,500 a month.
I think if we put a 6-month timeline, that's
I don't
perfect.
think it should be beyond 6 months.
And it
If you want to
gives
put 3
them-
months, it's up to you, but I'm just saying it should not be more than 6. Would be my recommendation.
well, as much
You
work,
need to
I guess my question
let us
between 3 and 6, obviously, is he's done a lot of work. Do you think he can do it in 90? I mean,
Well, it doesn't have to go to 6 months, right, if he can finish it up before.
And it's not just him. I mean, it's got to be that you got to have a partner on the other end. Of course. We have it. I mean, Daniel is spending some time on this as well. Give you an example, you know, part of the budget process, I indicated that we have put some money away for that. And, you know, one of the things that we've agreed to do is do the title policies on the properties that we're going to exchange. We've got to start that process too. But as far as getting everything done to where, okay, we're down, ready to sit down, execute all the agreements, do it all, get it done, and say, here it is, go to the courthouse and get it recorded. We just need to get it done.
Well, let's say we do 6 months, and then if it's done before, then we're done. Otherwise, we don't.
Well, that way you don't have to come back to
come
us.
back in 3 months.
I just don't think you ought to do it more than 6 months.
Okay.
No.
We'll let you be the guiding light on that.
Yeah.
All right, we got a motion by Commissioner Lopez for 6 months.
And just to be clear, that would be actually a month-to-month basis with a maximum of 6 months.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So we're finished in 3 months.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
then
finish, we're
3 months.
finished.
1, 2,
Right.
whatever, yeah.
I'll second that
And
motion.
then we have a second by Commissioner Cowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
Item number 11, adjourning to
Second the motion.
Okay, it is 6:59 PM. We're hereby adjourned into executive session.